ever wanted to create stunning cards with alcohol inks? Well, today that's just what we're going to do. Hi, I'm Stacy and welcome to my channel. I hope you stay a while. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them down in the comments below. I love hearing from you guys, so let's get started. Today we're going to be using some Yupo paper from Ranger along with some alcohol inks from Tim Holtz and some alcohol inks I picked up from Hobby Lobby. These sheets come in 8 by 10. I wanted to show that, so I'm going to be cutting them down to 4 by 5, so I get 4 card panels out of it. I'll just make my cards a little bit shorter than normal. And this is a lot of fun, and I'll try to give you some tips along the way. I have one of the air blowers from Tim Holtz. I'm not sure what it's called. And in this first pen, I believe I just use one color. Now, I'm not going to focus on the colors. Use what you have. Experiment. And I put a lot of isopropyl alcohol. I believe that's 90% or whatever percentage it is. And then I add my ink down. And I try not to go too heavy-handed with the alcohol ink, because I want to get texture and wispy layers and variation in the color. Pretty much no matter what color you use, maybe with the exception of some of your lighter colors, they have different color pigments in it. So the more alcohol you use and just one pigment or one alcohol color, it will give you the variations like we see here. And so I try to work from one corner to the other, and I lay a little bit of ink down, and then I take that poofer blower from Tim Holtz. If somebody knows what it's called, leave it in the comments for others. And I just work it from the middle to the edges and out, and then I try to add alcohol ink on any area, or alcohol on any areas like to the outside edges that I want to soften and spread out. If it's got some weird tendrils, which that's a look you can go for, but that's not what I was going for. And then this one, I'm mixing like 3 different colors together. So I just keep adding that isopropyl alcohol and blending it out. I try to add that down first before I add the alcohol ink and let it spread. If you add too much alcohol ink, it can become sticky. And one of the other things that I noticed that I have issues with is the blending solution from Ranger and Tim Holtz. I'm sure it's me. It has a resin in it. And so I don't like the way it looks. If it gets on any part of your Yupo paper, even if you don't have color there, you can see it. So I prefer using alcohol, with the exception of any of your mixatives, alloys, and also your alcohol inks with the mica powder in them. Those have to have that solution in it. Otherwise, those pigment powders that are in there, the shimmer portion won't adhere. It'll just wipe right off. And I made a panel, which I believe is coming up next with that, and I'll explain what happened later on in the card. And you can still use them. It's just you're going to lose that shimmer. And there's not as much color concentration in the alcohol ink, because it does have the shimmers in it, at least the ones I have anyway. And do you see how I keep coming in from the edge? So I'm softening those edges. I want the colors to blend out and be kind of wispy and soft. And even there's times I will put it on the outside and push the colors in from the corners of the glass mat. And I wanted, when I put some of that alcohol ink down, it kind of splattered on other parts of the Yupo paper when I was blowing it. So I just put the alcohol ink on the side, took a paintbrush and splattered it, and then I add a little bit more alcohol to that alcohol ink to make it more fluid. But if you add too much, it's going to lift. When you add alcohol to alcohol inks, it will create a lift. And I think I show you one at some point in here. A couple of them I made, I removed, and that's probably why I can't remember. Now here's where I'm going to bring in some of the alloys and mixatives, or yeah, I think it was an alloy. I should have used blending solution, because it would actually make that pigment of the shimmer powder in there adhere. I still gave it a go. I wanted to see what would happen. So I encourage you to experiment. And the same thing, I'm just adding more alcohol, and I will push that around and try to get the wispiness and get it to spread. And sometimes I'll push that color even up into the center, because I wanted the color to be more concentrated in the center and more wispy on the outside of the edges. And do you see how I'm going on the edge there, and then I'm kind of pushing it in? Some colors will almost completely lift. There I added too much alcohol ink or alcohol when I dropped it in with a dropper to the cardstock. I want to add it to the glass mat, but it still made it work. So just play around. You're going to get different results each time you do a background. And then I wanted to give a rainbow a go. And the best thing I could say here is make sure that your colors, each individual colors, if you don't want them to blend too much or get muddy, try to make sure that you get them dry, almost completely dry before you drop in the next color. This orange that I have and yellow that I have are so close that they kind of blended together. And then that green, when I came in, it ate up the yellow because I didn't make sure that it was dry enough. So it just went right up into it. So, but I can fix it. I go back and fix it. Same with the blue. I didn't make sure the green was dry enough. So that way, if that's the look you're going for, go for it. If you want it to be more crisp and there to be not the colors to muddy at all, let them dry in between a bit. And I'm going back in with the yellow and the orange to try to get those to be more definition between those two colors. And at the end, I think it turns out pretty well, especially after it dries. When it dried, I was pretty amazed because I wasn't real happy with this one in the beginning, but just keep going, guys, and set it aside. And when you come back to it later, you can always reactivate these inks. And if you don't like it at all, wipe it off with rubbing alcohol and start over. It will stain the Yupo a bit, but if you go in with similar colors, it'll cover it right back up. And I had a die cutting session with these wildflower stems, 1 and 2. They're from Tim Holtz, and that's one of his stamp sets. And this is the first time I'm ever using his alcohol lift ink. And it was pretty easy to use. I'm just inking up the stamp there, and then I'm going to press it down. And if I went back down into it, all that pigment that's on that stamp would have just went back onto the Yupo paper, to the alcohol ink background. So I brought in a piece of cardstock, and you can get a twofer out of it if you want to do it this way. I didn't end up making a card out of that, but you could. And then I'm going in with that stamp again, and then to get the ink off of there, I'm going to put it onto the piece of paper there. And then I just took a clean paper towel and I'm patting it. And if you look, I think, and then I know you're supposed to buff it after that. And when I did, you can see that it kind of brought some of that purple and smeared around. So I think next time I'll just kind of pat it when I do another card session with the alcohol or the lift ink. And I will just use a paper towel and pat it up so that I don't bring any of that ink back in or spread it. I don't know if it activates it, which would make sense. And then I immediately cleaned my stamp because the alcohol inks did stain it a little bit. It didn't bother me though. And then I just matted that background with a black mat. And then I'm going to bring in those wildflowers or the stems. I think they're called like wildflower stems or something like that. I used them in my last video. And I prefer liquid glue. And I have liquid glue and foam tape, and I have lots of other adhesives. You could cut these out of back your cardstock with an adhesive sheet and then die cut them so that it becomes like a sticker. For me, I did these the other day, and so they were in my stash. I wanted to use them, and so I'm using liquid glue. You just have to take the time to let it dry because that is plastic that it's sitting on. And then even weight it down with a big acrylic block, which I end up doing later, because it's not like adhering cardstock to cardstock where they kind of absorb the glue. You have to really wait for it to dry. And then I'm going to bring in some jimmies from my stash. I've been trying to use what's in my stash and not just keep buying new stuff. So you will see a lot of products that are probably older, but hopefully you can learn some things or be inspired. I do buy new stuff. You could see I have haul videos, but on my channel, I'm usually late to the game. I try to wait until things go on sale. But use what's in your stash. You may have something that's very similar to this. And here's the one where I used some of those mixatives. It was either a mixative or alloy. And I'm going to position this stamp on this card, and I'm looking, trying to figure out which way it goes. And I thought to myself, well, I can always flip it. It doesn't have to be exactly like it is on the package. And I'm just taking my hand and removing any, there's like a film over photopolymer stamps when you get them that come from the manufacturer. So I just use my hand and I remove it with that so that the ink will adhere. And same thing, I'm inking the image, I'm inking the stamp down onto the alcohol background, and I'm letting it sit, so hopefully it activates it. Like I said, it's my first time using it, and then I'm patting the excess off. Now, it went from having that pattern on it, but because I didn't use the alcohol, the blending solution that Ranger puts out, when I buffed it, it pushed that pigment into those areas, and it just basically covered up the stamping I did. But I still wanted to leave it in here so that hopefully you can learn from my mistake. The card still ends up beautiful. If you tilt it, you can see the honeycomb pattern in it, but it isn't crisp like it was with the sentiment on the other card. And this is the only coloring in this video. I went ahead and left the little bumblebee in here. Most of the time on my channel, probably 90% of the time or more, I color. That's what I enjoy doing. That's my jam, but I'm trying to branch out and use different products because I have all the stuff I need to use. Does anyone else? Raise your hand if you're someone who has a lot of product that you got with intentions to use it and have it. So that's me. So I'm trying to use what I have and experiment and make it work into what I'm comfortable doing or what I enjoy doing. And then I'm taking this Memento pen and I'm going around the edges that I fussy cut because it hides any mistakes you make in your fussy cutting. And I always go from the back of my images because if I slip with that pen, I'm going to mark the back of the image instead of the front that I took the time to color. Now I'm going to take a sentiment from that stamp set and I'm going to heat emboss it. Heat embossing will take and warp the Yupo paper a bit, especially if you stay too long in one spot. So I'm using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which will stay wet for a while, and it will on this Yupo paper even longer. And then I'm using clear embossing ink to set that. Now, if I was going to do this over again, I probably wouldn't heat emboss it. The backgrounds are so pretty. I think you need some archival ink or some StazOn. I don't know if this ink would dry or if Memento Tuxedo Black ink would dry, but I'm just taking that Yupo paper and pushing it down on my glass mat that's cool, and it flattened itself out for the most part. You have to look pretty close to see if there's any warping. And then I'm adhering it to a black mat that I had cut that is a 1/4 of an inch larger than that background. I brought out some foam tape to pop up that little bumblebee. And here I am. I'm taking those die cuts I have. I have a container full of them. So what I did was I had those done, then I did all the alcohol ink backgrounds, and then I assembled my cards in the end. And so I'm just positioning, figuring out the layout that I want, and then I'm going to start gluing them down. And then I'm going to give you a little tip about when you flip over a die cut. In this can be a little tedious with the glue, but I have that Barely Art glue with a precision tip on it, and so it gets pretty thin lines or little dots that I typically do. So there isn't too much glue seepage. You'll see me bring paper in every once in a while. I flip that die cut over, and when you do die cuts, there's a wrong side and right side. Well, you could use either or, but there's a pressed beauty to using a die cut like a Big Shot, an Empress, a Sizzix Switch, a Gemini, that it presses the paper and it rounds the edges a bit. So what I did when I flipped it over to the back side, it's a more sharp edge. It doesn't look as smooth as the others. I just took my bone folder and went over those edges and it rounds them out. It gives it a very similar look to the other side of the die cuts. And then I just let them overhang the panel and trimmed off the excess. And then we're going to add this cute little bumblebee. I didn't like this. When I was making this background with the alcohol ink, it was probably one of my least favorite while I was making it, and then it became one of my favorite. I don't know why. I think it came out really pretty. I thought it was kind of funny that one that I didn't like and almost gave up on and just wiped clean and started over was one of my favorites. And then I wanted to fill in that little bit of space. And I'll do the same thing. Those long shears from Tim Holtz are great for trimming off panels or excess overhang on your cards. I use them for fabric I use them for fabric and I use them for paper, and they haven't dulled at all. This one here, I'm going to use that alcohol lift ink again, and I'm going to use a background stamp. And this was pretty stunning to me. This alcohol lift ink, boy, I gotta play around with it some more because it was fun. I'm wondering what other type of things I could do with it. So same thing, I pressed it down and then I'm just taking a piece of copy paper, a scrap, and then I picked it up, stamped my stamp down on it, cleaned it, and then I'm going back in again and I'm letting it set. And this one seemed to hold the ink really well, and it's a cheap Memento stamp from Hobby Lobby that I got a long time ago. It's an acrylic stamp, but for whatever reason, that alcohol lift ink just sat on top of it and did magical stuff. And it's probably because photopolymer clings better to inks. So it might work to the benefit to use the acrylic stamps for this, but I don't know. You're not going to get a crisp image if you do that though. And so I cut this butterfly out of some glitter cardstock. This is just a butterfly I had in my stash. And then I took and I dry embossed that die on some cardstock. And I show how to do that. It's a video I have a while back with the two little bears at the drive-in. I show how to do that and emboss with your dies. So you have to have the mat for your die cutting machine, whichever you use. And then I took that so it put the impression in it because it wasn't a two-part die. And then I fussy cut the edge so that it would map behind the butterfly die cut. And then I'm taking a stamp set from Tim Holtz that I have, and I did it in the Memento black ink. Not Memento. Is it Memento? Yeah. Versafine. Well, it stays wet. I thought it was going to dry, so I had to heat emboss this one. That was not my plan, but because it was so wet, I knew it was going to smear. So I just used clear embossing powder again and heat embossed it. I'm going to have to try some archival ink and get back to you guys and let you know. And then I'm just gluing the center of this butterfly down. I want the ink wings to pop up. And that's a little diamond painting tray I have. And I just take my embellishments or gems and shake it in there. And it holds them and it helps to flip them over. And then I would dot the glue and let it dry a little bit before putting your gems down or embellishments because it is plastic, it doesn't want to adhere, so I had to keep pushing it down with my hand, but no biggie. And then I took and die cut a different butterfly that I got from Michael's out of that glitter cardstock, as you can see right in the center. Same thing I did with the vellum. I dry embossed it and then fussy cut it, and I'm going to glue it to the back of this die cut. But I wasn't going to waste that glitter paper because it's expensive and no one's going to ever know that there's a butterfly cut out of the center of it. So stretch your stash. And you could see I got smart and got my big acrylic block out so that I could weigh it down while it dries. And then I just die cut that hello out of some colored cardstock that I liked, that I thought went well with it. And I'm only adhering the center of that butterfly. And I'm using my reverse tweezers to help hold that hello so I don't get glue on my fingers. And then I've got some more embellishments there. Those are from Trinity Stamps. I don't know if they still carry these. I got these so long ago. And I just spaced them out and tried to use an odd number. There's that rainbow background. Isn't it pretty? Like, I'm going to flip it over here in a minute. Once it dried, I think that the separation between the colors looked better. And then I'm using that We Are Memory Creepers magnetic self-healing cut mat to help line up my word die because they're individual letters, and then I use some post-it tape to hold it, to go over the top and hold them in place, a T-square ruler to help me get them straight, and then I'm going to glue them on there, and because it's liquid glue, I'm just letting them sit there. I haven't removed that post-it tape while it dries. On cardstock, I probably could have pulled it off nearly immediately. And then I'm bringing in some press and seal after I laid out my die cuts and how I wanted them, and picked them up. And then I'm going to take all the ones that are in the back that make contact, and I'm going to glue those down. Put glue on them so I can glue them down. And I had a little bit of the die cut still left in there that should have came out. And you could see I'm only adding it to like that greenery leaf piece that goes up in the back and that piece there, because it overlapped. I didn't add glue to it. And then I'm just going to add my glue to that, and then I'm going to adhere that down, flip it over, and I'm going to use my scissors to trim off the excess. And here they are. I think they're stunning. What do you think? Are you willing to give alcohol inks a try? If you do, let me know. I think they're a lot of fun, and I am looking forward to trying other mediums like paste and other things with them. And thank you guys. Thank you for coming over, spending some time with me today, and supporting my channel. As always, if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.